The gunshot that shattered the morning air wasn't meant for Zara Owens, but the bullet grazed her shoulder all the same as she dove behind the water trough outside the Concord General Store. The year was 1878, and California's inland valleys were still wild enough that disputes got settled with lead more often than law. She pressed her hand against the bleeding wound, her breath coming in sharp gasps as two men continued their firefight across the dusty Main Street. One was the sheriff's deputy, the other a cattle rustler who'd been caught red-handed. Zara had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, collecting supplies for the ranch where she worked as a bookkeeper. "Stay down." The command came from somewhere to her left, a deep voice rough with urgency. Before she could respond, someone was sliding into the narrow space beside her, a tall figure in worn denim and a dusty black hat. He positioned himself between her and the gunfire without hesitation, his back taking the exposure she'd been risking. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. The rustler lay dead in the street, and the deputy was calling for the doctor. But the man beside Zara didn't move away immediately. He turned to look at her, and she found herself staring into the most intense pair of green eyes she'd ever seen. "You hit bad?" he asked, already reaching for the bandana around his neck. "Just grazed," she managed, though her voice shook more than she wanted it to. "I've had worse." His eyebrow lifted slightly at that, but he didn't question it. Instead, he gently moved her hand aside and pressed the clean bandana against her shoulder. "Keep pressure on it." "Doc Miller's office is just down the street." "I know where it is," she said, perhaps more sharply than necessary. The adrenaline was making her snappish. "I live here." "Then you know Doc Miller's going to want to clean that properly." He stood, offering her his hand. "Can you walk?" She could, though her legs felt unsteady. His hand was calloused and strong, pulling her up with an ease that suggested real strength behind it. He was taller than she'd first thought, probably 6 feet or more, with dark brown hair that needed cutting and a jaw shadowed with several days' worth of beard. "Thank you," she said, meaning it despite her sharp tone. "You didn't have to shield me like that." "Couldn't exactly let a lady get shot," he replied simply, as if putting himself in danger for a stranger was the most natural thing in the world. "I'm Preston Garrett, by the way. Most folks call me Press. Zara Owens." She was still holding the bandana to her shoulder, aware that blood was seeping into the fabric of her dress. It was one of her better ones, too, a blue calico that she'd bought just last month. "You always introduce yourself to women you've just met by throwing yourself in front of bullets." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Only on Tuesdays." Despite everything, she felt herself smile back. "Lucky for me it's Tuesday then." The moment stretched between them, something unspoken passing in the space of that shared smile. Then reality reasserted itself in the form of renewed pain in her shoulder, and she winced. "Come on," Press said, his hand moving to her elbow to steady her. "Let's get you to the doctor before you bleed all over Concord's Main Street." Dr. Miller's office was indeed just down the street, a neat wooden building with white painted trim that somehow stayed clean despite the dust that covered everything else in town. Press helped her up the steps and through the door, where the doctor's wife took one look at Zara's bloody shoulder and immediately began directing traffic. "Set her in the back room, young man," Mrs. Miller instructed. "Doctor's with another patient, but he'll be right along." The back room was small but scrupulously clean, with a narrow examination table covered in white cloth. Press helped Zara sit, then stepped back, looking suddenly uncertain about whether he should stay or go. "You don't have to wait," Zara told him, though part of her hoped he would. "I'm sure you have things to do." "Nothing that can't wait." He leaned against the wall, settling in like he had all the time in the world, Besides, I want to make sure you're all right." Dr. Miller bustled in before she could respond, a portly man with wire-rimmed spectacles and gentle hands. He shooed Press out into the waiting room over Zara's weak protest and proceeded to examine her shoulder with professional efficiency. "Clean wound," he pronounced after a few minutes. "Bullet went straight through the fabric and took a piece of skin with it, but nothing deep." "You were lucky, Miss Owens." "Second time someone's told me that today," she said wryly. The doctor cleaned and bandaged the wound, gave her strict instructions about keeping it dry and watching for signs of infection, and charged her $2 for his services. When she emerged back into the waiting room, Press was still there, hat in his hands, looking at the medical diagrams on the wall with apparent fascination. He turned when he heard her step. "All patched up. Good as new," she confirmed. "Thank you again for what you did." "I never properly thanked you for probably saving my life." "You thanked me twice already," he pointed out. "Any more and I'm going to get a swelled head." She laughed, surprising herself. She wasn't usually so quick to laugh with strangers, but there was something about Press Garrett that put her at ease despite the unusual circumstances of their meeting. "Can I at least buy you a cup of coffee? It's the least I can do." "I'd like that," he said, and the warmth in his voice made something flutter in her chest. The cafe across the street served decent coffee and better pie, and Zara found herself settling into a corner booth across from this man who'd appeared out of nowhere to help her. The lunch crowd hadn't arrived yet, leaving them in relative privacy as the proprietor brought over 2 cups of steaming coffee and a slice of apple pie that Press insisted they share. "So what brings you to Concord?" she asked, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. The shock was wearing off now, leaving her feeling slightly chilled despite the California heat outside. "Looking for work," Press said. "I've been drifting for a while, but I'm thinking it's time to put down roots somewhere. Concord seems like a decent town." "It is," she agreed. "Growing fast, too. New people every week, it seems. What about you? Born here?" "No, I came from Missouri about 3 years ago." She took a sip of coffee, letting it warm her from the inside. "After my parents died, there wasn't much keeping me there. My aunt and uncle have a ranch about 5 miles outside town. I keep their books, help with the household accounts. Must be good with numbers then." "Good enough." She studied him over the rim of her cup. "What kind of work are you looking for?" "Whatever's available." "I've done ranch work, driven cattle, even spent a season as a deputy marshal up in Oregon." He shrugged. "I'm not particular, as long as it's honest work and the pay's fair." Something in the way he said it, the casual mention of being a deputy marshal, made her look at him more closely. There was a steadiness to him, a calm self-possession that spoke of someone who'd seen trouble and knew how to handle it. It was there in the way he positioned himself in the booth, with his back to the wall and a clear view of the door. In the way his eyes tracked movement even as he talked to her. "The Harrison Ranch is looking for hands," she offered. "That's where I work, actually. My uncle mentioned just yesterday that they needed to hire on another 2 or 3 men before the fall roundup." Interest sparked in his eyes. "That's so. I could put in a word for you if you'd like. After what you did today, it's the least I can do." "I'd appreciate that." He pushed the pie plate toward her with his fork. "Your turn. I've been doing all the eating." They shared the pie and another cup of coffee, and Zara found herself telling him things she didn't usually share with strangers. About how she'd learned bookkeeping from her father, who'd been a banker. About the long journey west after her parents' death from influenza. About her aunt and uncle, who'd taken her in without question and given her not just a home but a purpose. Press listened with genuine attention, asking questions that showed he was really hearing her. In turn, he told her about growing up in Texas, about learning to ride before he could properly walk, about losing his own family to a Comanche raid when he was 16. He'd been away from the homestead that day, working for a neighbor, and had come home to find everything gone. "I'm sorry," Zara said softly, seeing the old pain in his eyes. "That must have been terrible." "Long time ago now," he said, but she could tell it still hurt. "Some wounds never fully healed. I've been moving ever since, never staying in one place too long." "Why not?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. Didn't seem like there was any point. No family to settle for, no particular place calling me home. He met her eyes. "But lately, I've been thinking that's a lonely way to live." The honesty in his words struck something deep in her chest. She knew about loneliness, about that hollow feeling of going through the motions without real connection. Her aunt and uncle were kind, but they had each other, had built a life together over 30 years of marriage. Zara had always felt slightly outside that, a guest in their happiness. "Yes," she agreed quietly. "It is." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the sounds of the cafe filling the space between them. Then Press glanced out the window at the position of the sun and straightened. "I should let you get back to your day," he said. "I'm sure you've got things to do and I've kept you long enough." "I need to finish getting those supplies," she admitted, though she was reluctant to end their conversation. It had been a long time since she'd felt this comfortable talking with someone. "But about the job, if you're serious, meet me here tomorrow morning at 8. I'll take you out to the ranch and introduce you to my uncle." "I'm serious," he assured her. "And thank you, Zara, for the coffee and the kindness both." He paid for their meal over her protests, insisting that it was only fair since she was helping him find work. As they walked back out into the bright sunshine, Zara felt oddly light despite the ache in her shoulder. The day had started with gunfire and blood, but somehow it was ending with the promise of something new. Press walked her back to the general store, retrieved his horse from the hitching post outside the cafe, and tipped his hat to her in farewell. "Until tomorrow, then." "Tomorrow," she agreed, watching him ride off down the street. He sat a horse well, she noticed, the kind of easy grace that came from years in the saddle. The rest of her shopping took twice as long as it should have because everyone wanted to hear about the shooting. By the time she loaded her supplies into her uncle's wagon and started the drive back to the ranch, the sun was past its peak and starting its long slide toward evening. The Harrison Ranch sprawled across a valley between two low hills, several hundred acres of grazing land with a creek running through it. The house was a sturdy two-story structure built of timber and stone, with a wide porch that caught the evening breeze. Beyond it stood the barn, the bunkhouse, and various other outbuildings that made up a working cattle operation. Her Aunt Margaret was in the kitchen when Zara came through the back door, her arms full of supplies. Margaret took one look at Zara's bandaged shoulder and the blood-stained dress and immediately set down her mixing bowl. "What on earth happened?" she demanded, hurrying over. Zara explained about the shooting while Margaret fussed over her, checking the bandage and clucking her tongue disapprovingly at the whole situation. Her Uncle Robert came in from the barn in the middle of the story, his weathered face creasing with concern. "You could have been killed," he said gruffly, but his eyes were soft with worry. He was a big man, tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of strength that came from a lifetime of hard work. "But I wasn't, thanks to a stranger who happened to be there." Zara finished unloading the supplies while she talked. "Actually, Uncle Robert, he's looking for work. I told him you were hiring." "That's so." Robert scratched his beard thoughtfully. "What's his experience?" "Ranch work, cattle driving, and he's been a deputy marshal. His name is Preston Garrett." "Garrett," Robert repeated, testing the name. "Don't know the family. Where's he from?" "Texas originally, but he's been moving around." Zara tried to keep her voice casual. "I told him to meet me in town tomorrow morning and I'd bring him out to talk to you." Robert studied her for a long moment, and Zara had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see more than she wanted him to. But all he said was, "All right. If he helped you today, least I can do is give him a fair hearing." That night, Zara lay in her room under the sloped roof of the second floor and found she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those moments behind the water trough playing out again. The gunfire, the fear, and then Press sliding in beside her like some kind of guardian angel in denim and dust. She touched the bandage on her shoulder gingerly. It could have been so much worse. The bullet could have hit something vital. She could be lying in Doc Miller's office right now, fighting for her life. Or already dead. Instead, she was here, safe in her bed, thinking about a green-eyed cowboy who'd smiled at her over apple pie and listened like her words mattered. She barely knew him, she reminded herself. One conversation over coffee didn't mean anything. He was probably just being polite, grateful that she'd offered to help him find work. But she remembered the way he'd looked at her, the warmth in his voice when he'd said he'd like coffee with her. The way he'd positioned himself between her and danger without a second thought. Tomorrow, she thought. She'd see him again tomorrow. The thought made her smile into her pillow as she finally drifted off to sleep. Morning came bright and clear, the kind of perfect California day that made people understand why others traveled thousands of miles to settle here. Zara dressed carefully, choosing a green dress that brought out the hazel in her eyes and pulling her dark blonde hair back into a neat bun. She told herself she wasn't making any special effort, that she always dressed nicely for town trips. The lie was comforting even if she didn't quite believe it. She was hitching up the wagon when her uncle came out from the barn. "Want me to come with you?" he offered. "No need," she said quickly, then modified at his raised eyebrow. "I mean, I'm just bringing him back here for you to interview properly. No point in both of us making the trip twice. Hum. Robert didn't sound convinced, but he didn't argue either. "Well, you be careful. And take your time evaluating his character on the ride back. A man shows his true colors in conversation." "Yes, Uncle Robert, and Zara." He waited until she looked at him. "Your aunt and I, we just want you to be happy. You know that, right?" The tenderness in his voice made her throat tight. "I know, I am happy." "Your content," he corrected gently. "That's not quite the same thing." She didn't have an answer to that, so she just kissed his weathered cheek and climbed up onto the wagon seat. The drive into Concord took about 45 minutes at an easy pace, and she used the time to practice what she'd say. Just a polite greeting, nothing more. Professional. She was doing him a favor by bringing him out to the ranch, and he was doing them a favor by agreeing to work there if Robert hired him. Simple. But her heart was beating faster than usual as she pulled up in front of the cafe. And when she saw Press already there, leaning against the hitching post with his horse beside him, that fluttering feeling returned to her chest. He straightened when he saw her, a smile spreading across his face. "Morning, morning," she replied, hoping her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Ready to head out?" "Ready." He tied his horse to the back of the wagon and climbed up onto the seat beside her without waiting for an invitation. "How's the shoulder?" "Sore, but all right." "Dr. Miller said as long as I keep it clean, it should heal fine." They headed out of town, and for a few minutes neither of them spoke. It was a comfortable silence, though not awkward. The morning air was still cool, not yet heated by the climbing sun, and birds sang in the scrub oak along the road. "Nice country," Press observed, looking out over the rolling hills. "Good grazing land." "My uncle thinks so. He and my aunt started with just 50 head of cattle 15 years ago. Now they're running over 300. "That's impressive." He glanced at her. Sounds like they know what they're doing. They do. Uncle Robert grew up on a ranch in Kentucky, learned the business from the ground up. When he and Aunt Margaret married, they decided they wanted to build something of their own out here. She guided the wagon around a rut in the road. It's been hard work, but they've made it pay. And they brought you out to help with the books. Not exactly. They brought me out because I was family and had nowhere else to go. The bookkeeping was just a way to make myself useful. She said it matter-of-factly, without self-pity. It was simply the truth. Press was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. I think you're probably more useful than you give yourself credit for. Running a ranch takes more than muscle and cattle sense. Takes someone who can track the money, make sure things add up right. That's kind of you to say. It's not kindness, it's fact. He shifted on the seat to look at her more directly. I've worked enough places to know that good bookkeeping makes the difference between a ranch that thrives and one that just scrapes by. Your aunt and uncle are lucky to have you. The sincerity in his tone made warmth bloom in her chest. Thank you. They talked easily during the rest of the drive, and Zara found herself relaxing into the conversation the same way she had yesterday. Press had a way of asking questions that drew her out, made her want to share things. But he wasn't pushy about it, and when she turned questions back on him, he answered just as openly. He told her about the different places he'd worked over the years, the ranches and trail drives, and that one strange season working as a deputy marshal in a town so small it barely qualified for the name. He had a gift for storytelling, painting pictures with words that made her laugh or lean forward with interest. So what made you leave Oregon? She asked. If you were a deputy marshal, that seems like steady work. It was, he agreed. But the marshal who hired me got voted out, and the new one wanted to bring in his own men. I didn't take it personally, just moved on. And you've been moving ever since. For about 3 months now, yeah. He looked out over the valley as the ranch came into view. Like I said yesterday, I'm thinking it's time to stop drifting. What changed? He was quiet for a long moment, and she thought maybe she'd pushed too far, asked too personal a question. But then he said, I turned 28 last month. Sat in a hotel room by myself and realized I'd been wandering for 12 years and didn't have much to show for it. No home, no family, nobody who'd miss me if I disappeared. He glanced at her. Seemed like maybe it was time to change that. 28 isn't old, she pointed out. You have time. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? 24. She pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the ranch house. And before you say it, I know that's not old either, but sometimes it feels like life is passing by while I'm just watching. Yeah, he said softly. I know that feeling. Their eyes met and held, and in that moment, Zara felt something shift and settle into place, like a key turning in a lock. This man understood her in a way that felt both surprising and inevitable. She barely knew him, and yet she felt more seen by him than by people she'd known for years. The moment was broken by her Uncle Robert stepping out onto the porch. That the fellow you told me about, he called. Yes, sir, Press answered before Zara could, hopping down from the wagon with easy grace. He walked up to the porch with his hat in his hand, meeting Robert's gaze directly. Preston Garrett, thank you for agreeing to see me. Robert studied him for a long moment, the kind of assessing look that had made stronger men squirm. But Press stood steady under the scrutiny, not cocky but not nervous either. Just calm. Finally, Robert nodded. Come on inside, let's talk. Zara watched them disappear into the house, then unhitched the wagon and led the horse to the barn. She should go inside, start on the books that needed updating, but instead she found herself lingering, wondering how the interview was going. It took nearly an hour before the two men emerged. Zara, who'd given up pretending to work and was openly watching from the porch, stood up as they approached. "Well?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Robert grinned. "He starts tomorrow. Going to put him in the south pasture rotation first, see how he handles cattle work." Relief and pleasure flooded through her in equal measure. "That's wonderful." "Thank you, sir," Press said, shaking Robert's hand. "I won't let you down. See that you don't. Pays $30 a month plus board. Bunkhouse is over there. Meals are in the main house at 6, noon and 6. We don't tolerate drinking, fighting, or shirking. Work hard and we'll get along fine." "Fair enough." Robert headed back into the house, leaving Press and Zara standing together in the yard. Press looked at her, that warm smile returning. "Looks like you'll be seeing more of me." "Looks like," she agreed, trying not to sound too pleased about it. "When will you move your things in?" "This afternoon, if that's all right. Don't have much to move, just what's in my saddlebags. The bunkhouse should have everything you need. There are 3 other hands right now, all good men. They'll help you get settled. I'm sure I'll manage." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back slightly to maintain eye contact. "Zara, I want you to know I'm grateful for this. Not just the job, but the chance to stay in one place for a while, to see where it leads." The way he said it, looking right into her eyes, made it clear he wasn't just talking about the job. Her pulse kicked up. "I'm glad I could help. Maybe once I'm settled I could take you to dinner, as a proper thank you. I'd like that." The words came out softer than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. "Good." His smile widened. "Then I'll look forward to it." He retrieved his horse from where it was tied to the wagon, swung up into the saddle with the ease of long practice, and headed back toward town to collect his belongings. Zara watched him go, her hand pressed to her chest where her heart was beating like a wild thing. This was foolish, she told herself. Getting excited over a man she barely knew, reading meaning into simple kindness. She should be more sensible, more cautious. But when she went back inside and caught her aunt watching her with a knowing smile, she couldn't help but smile back. "He seems nice," Margaret said mildly, as if commenting on the weather. "He is," Zara agreed, "and handsome." "Aunt Margaret," her aunt laughed. "I'm just observing, and I'm happy to see that color in your cheeks. You've been alone too long, sweetheart." "I'm not alone. I have you and Uncle Robert. You know what I mean." Margaret returned to her bread dough, kneading it with practiced efficiency. "A woman your age should be thinking about her own life, her own family. We love having you here, but we don't want you to think you have to stay out of obligation." "I don't feel obligated," Zara protested. "I'm happy here." "Content," Margaret corrected, the same word Robert had used. "Just like your uncle said. But happiness, real happiness, that's something more. That's building a life with someone, working toward a future together." Zara thought about Press's words from the wagon ride, about feeling like life was passing by while she just watched. "Maybe," she allowed. "No maybe about it." Margaret shaped the dough into loaves with quick, confident movements. "Now I'm not saying rush into anything. I'm just saying keep your heart open. Sometimes good things come along when we least expect them." Press returned that afternoon with everything he owned packed into 2 saddlebags and a bedroll. Zara watched from her window as her uncle showed him around, introduced him to the other ranch hands, and got him settled in the bunkhouse. She told herself she was just curious, not watching for another glimpse of those green eyes or that easy smile. The lie was getting harder to maintain. That night at dinner, Press joined them at the long table in the main house. The other hands were there too. Samuel, a weathered man in his 50s who'd been with the ranch for a decade. Tommy, a young man of about 20 who was saving up to start his own place. And Diego, who'd come up from Mexico 3 years ago and knew more about horses than anyone Zara had ever met. They were all curious about the new man, sizing him up with the mixture of welcome and caution that working men showed each other. But Press handled it well, answering questions with easy good humor, showing respect without being obsequious. "Heard you were a deputy marshal," Samuel said around a mouthful of beef stew. "That true. For about 8 months up in Oregon," Press confirmed. "Small town, not much excitement." "Why'd you leave law work for ranch hand wages?" Tommy asked bluntly. "Wanted to do something with my hands that didn't involve a badge and a gun." Press reached for the biscuits. "And I like working with cattle, always have." Diego, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up in his accented English. "You know horses. Enough to get by. Not as well as I'd like, though." "Always looking to learn more." That was apparently the right answer because Diego nodded approvingly. "I show you some things. Good horses, they make all the difference." The conversation flowed more easily after that, the men swapping stories and opinions with the comfort of people who worked well together. Zara found herself watching Press, noting how he listened as much as he talked, how he seemed genuinely interested in what others had to say. And how, whenever he thought no one was looking, his eyes found her across the table. After dinner, the men headed back to the bunkhouse while Zara helped her aunt clean up. Through the window, she could see them standing in a loose circle outside, talking and smoking. Press was among them, but slightly apart, still new enough to be not quite part of the group yet. "He'll fit in well," Margaret observed, following her gaze. "The men like him. It's only been a few hours. Sometimes that's all it takes to know." Her aunt handed her a dish to dry. "Your uncle could tell in 5 minutes that he was good people, steady, honest." Zara dried the dish carefully. "You're both very certain about someone you just met. We've been running this ranch for 15 years. You learn to read people." Margaret washed another plate, her hands moving in the soapy water. "And besides, he's got that look." "What look?" "The look of a man who's tired of running and ready to plant roots." Margaret smiled at her. "Those are the best kind. They work hard because they care about where they are, not just what they are doing." Over the following weeks, Zara had to admit her aunt was right. Press threw himself into the ranch work with a dedication that impressed even Samuel, who was notoriously hard to please. He was up before dawn and worked until dusk, learning the rhythms of the ranch with remarkable speed. But he also kept his promise about taking Zara to dinner. The first Saturday after he started, he cleaned up, borrowed the wagon, and drove her into town to the restaurant at the Concord Hotel. It was the nicest place to eat within 20 miles, with white tablecloths and real silverware. Zara wore her best dress, a deep blue cotton with tiny buttons up the front, and took extra care with her hair. When she came downstairs and saw Press waiting in the parlor, his eyes widened with appreciation. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you. You clean up well yourself." He did. In dark trousers and a white shirt, with his hair still damp from washing and his jaw freshly shaved, he looked like a different man from the dusty cowboy who'd worked cattle all week. Though the green eyes were the same, warm and attentive as he helped her into the wagon. Dinner was wonderful. They talked about everything and nothing, the conversation flowing as easily as it had from the beginning. Press told her more about his travels, the different places he'd seen, the variety of work he'd done. Zara shared more about her life before California, her childhood in Missouri, the dreams she'd had before her parents died. "What did you want to be?" Press asked. "When you were young, before everything changed." "A teacher," she admitted. "I loved reading, loved learning. I thought maybe I could help other children love it too." "Why didn't you?" "After my parents died, I had to be practical. My aunt and uncle needed help and I needed a home. Teaching requires certification, time I didn't have." She shrugged, trying not to sound bitter about it. "It's fine. I like what I do. But it's not what you dreamed of. No, she met his eyes. What about you? What did you dream of before the Comanche raid? Having a family like the one I lost, he said without hesitation. A piece of land, a house, children running around. My pa had all that, and I wanted the same. His voice grew quieter. Then it was gone, and I figured I'd lost my chance at it. Why? Because I was 16 and angry and didn't think I deserved it anymore. He reached across the table, not quite touching her hand but close enough that she could feel the warmth of his skin. Spent 12 years punishing myself for surviving when they didn't. Zara did reach for his hand then, covering it with hers. It wasn't your fault. I know that now. Took me long enough to figure it out, though. He turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. Meeting you helped. How could I help? We barely know each other. Don't we? He asked it gently, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. Feels like I've known you longer than a few weeks. It did, she realized. It felt like they'd been having this conversation, sharing these moments for much longer than the calendar would suggest. Like something in her recognized something in him and said, yes, this is right. Yes, she said softly. It does feel like that. They talked until the restaurant closed, the waitress politely suggesting they might want to continue their evening elsewhere. Press paid the bill and helped Zara back into the wagon, but instead of heading straight back to the ranch, he drove to a spot he'd discovered during his explorations of the area. It was a small rise overlooking the valley, with a clear view of the stars that filled the night sky. He helped her down from the wagon and they stood together looking up at the vast expanse above them. You can't see stars like this in town, he said. Too many lights. It's beautiful. Zara tilted her head back, taking in the sweep of the Milky Way. Makes you feel small. Makes me feel lucky. He was looking at her, not the stars. That out of all the places I could have been, all the roads I could have taken, I ended up exactly where I needed to be, her breath caught. Press. Too soon, he asked. Tell me if I'm pushing too hard, too fast. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. You're not, she assured him. It's just, I'm not used to someone being so direct. Would you prefer I wasn't? She thought about it, about the careful dances of courtship she'd observed, the games and hints and assumptions. Then she looked at Press, at the honesty in his face, and shook her head. No, I like that you say what you mean. Then here's what I mean. He took both her hands in his, holding them gently. I know it's only been a few weeks and maybe I'm crazy for feeling this way so fast. But I think about you all the time, Zara. When I'm working, when I'm lying in my bunk at night, first thing in the morning, you're there in my head and my heart, and I can't imagine not having you there. Tears pricked her eyes. I feel the same way. It terrifies me how much I feel. How fast it's happened. Why does it terrify you? Because what if it doesn't last? What if this is just, I don't know, excitement from everything being new? What if we wake up in 6 months and realize we don't actually know each other at all? Then we'll learn, he said simply. Zara, I can't promise you everything will be perfect, but I can promise I'll show up every day trying my best. I can promise I'll be honest with you, work hard for us, and never take you for granted. He lifted her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. That's all any of us can do. That's enough, she whispered. More than enough. He pulled her closer slowly, giving her time to pull back if she wanted, but she didn't want to pull back. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted the promise she could feel building between them. When he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet, the kind of kiss that spoke of patience and care. His hands cradled her face like she was something precious, and she felt herself melt into the warmth of him. They stood there under the stars for a long time, holding each other, sharing soft kisses and softer words. And when they finally headed back to the ranch, Zara felt like everything had shifted. The world looked different now, brighter and fuller of possibility. Her aunt was waiting up when they got back, reading in the parlor by lamplight. She looked up when Zara came in, saw her face, and smiled. "Good evening." "Wonderful," Zara said, unable to stop smiling. "I'm glad, sweetheart. You deserve wonderful." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Zara's life. Press was true to his word, showing up every day with steady dedication to both his work and their growing relationship. They stole moments together whenever they could, conversations in the barn, walks after dinner, Sundays spent exploring the countryside. The other ranch hands noticed, of course. Samuel made gruff comments about young love while Tommy teased Press mercilessly. But it was all good-natured, and even Diego, usually taciturn, seemed pleased by the development. Robert and Margaret watched it all with approval, treating Press more and more like family as time passed. He ate dinner at the main house most nights now, sitting beside Zara at the long table and participating in the easy conversation of people who cared about each other. 2 months after Press had arrived, the ranch faced its first major challenge with him there. A section of fence went down during a storm, and nearly 50 head of cattle wandered into the neighboring property. It took 3 days of hard riding to round them all up, and Press was instrumental in the effort, working tirelessly alongside the other men. "He's good people," Robert told Zara on the 3rd night, when the men finally returned with the last of the missing cattle. "Doesn't complain, doesn't slack off, works like it's his own ranch at stake." "He cares about doing things right," Zara said, watching Press unsaddle his horse in the yard below. Even exhausted and covered in dust, he moved with that easy grace that had caught her attention from the beginning. "He cares about you," Robert corrected. "That's why he works so hard. Wants to prove he's worthy. He doesn't have to prove anything. Maybe not to you, but to himself I think he does." Robert put a hand on her shoulder. "Just be patient with him, Zara. Men like that, who have been alone as long as he has, sometimes it takes them a while to believe they deserve good things." She thought about that conversation later, when she and Press were taking their usual evening walk. The sun was setting over the western hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They walked hand in hand, comfortable in the silence. "You were amazing these past few days," she told him. "Everyone's been saying so. Just doing my job. It's more than that. You care about this place, about the people here." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "It's the first place that's felt like home since I lost my family. The first place I can see myself staying." "Is that what you want, to stay, more than anything?" He stopped walking, turning to face her. "But I need you to understand something, Zara. I'm not staying just because of the job or even just because of your uncle and aunt. I'm staying because of you, for you." Her heart seemed to expand in her chest. "Press, let me finish." He took both her hands. "I know we haven't known each other long. A few months isn't much time in the grand scheme of things. But every day I'm more certain that you're what I've been looking for all these years. That all the wandering was just leading me here to you." "I feel the same way," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Like everything in my life was just preparation for meeting you. Then you need to know something." He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself. "I'm in love with you, Zara, completely, absolutely in love with you. And I know that might be too much too soon, and if it is, I'll back off. But I can't keep pretending what I feel is anything less than it is." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "It's not too much. It's perfect, because I love you too." The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion he'd been holding back until now, and she kissed him back just as fiercely. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want to marry you," he said, I want to build a life with you, have a family with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes to all of it. I should talk to your uncle first, do this properly. He already knows how we feel. Everyone does." She laughed through her happy tears. "But yes, talk to him. Ask his permission. We'll do everything right." Press talked to Robert the next day. Zara waited anxiously in the kitchen with her aunt, trying to focus on the pie she was supposed to be making. But her hands were shaking too much to properly crimp the crust, and finally Margaret just took over with an indulgent smile. "Stop worrying. You know Robert approves. What if he thinks it's too fast? Then he'll say so, but I don't think he will." Margaret slid the pie into the oven. "He and I knew after 2 weeks that we'd get married. Sometimes when it's right, it's right." The men emerged from Robert's office after what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes. Robert's face was serious and Zara's heart sank for a moment. But then he saw her and smiled, and she knew it was all right. "Come here, girl," he said, opening his arms. She went to him and he hugged her tight. "You've got my blessing, both of you." Press was beaming, and when Robert released her, she went straight into her fiancé's arms. "He said yes. I heard." Press kissed the top of her head. "Going to make an honest woman of you, Miss Owens. Going to make an honest man of you too, Mr. Garrett." They were married 6 weeks later, in early December of 1878. It was a small ceremony in Concord's church, with just family and close friends in attendance. Zara wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Margaret had helped her sew, with tiny pearl buttons and lace at the collar. Press wore a new suit, dark and formal, though he'd drawn the line at a cravat. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the minister asked if Press would take Zara as his wife, he answered with a firm "I will" that carried through the whole church. When Zara gave her own vow, her voice was clear and strong despite the happy tears streaming down her face. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." And Press did, sweeping Zara into his arms and kissing her thoroughly enough that someone in the back pew's wolf whistled. They broke apart laughing, faces flushed, and walked back down the aisle hand in hand as husband and wife. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with a feast that Margaret had been preparing for days. The whole town seemed to turn out, bringing food and gifts and good wishes. They danced in the barn, which had been cleared and decorated for the occasion, while someone played a fiddle and another person kept time on a guitar. Press held Zara close as they moved to the music, his cheek pressed against her hair. "Happy," he murmured. "More than I knew I could be," she admitted. "You. Feels like I've been waiting my whole life for this. For you." They'd built a small house on a piece of land Robert had given them as a wedding gift, situated about a mile from the main ranch buildings. It was just 2 rooms and a loft for now, but it was theirs, built by Press's hands with help from the other men. Zara had furnished it simply, with a bed Robert had crafted, a table and chairs from town, and curtains she'd sewn herself. When the celebration finally wound down and they rode to their new home in the wagon, Zara felt a flutter of nerves. She knew what came next, what was expected on a wedding night. Her aunt had talked to her, explained things in practical if slightly embarrassing terms. But knowing and experiencing were 2 different things. Press must have sensed her nervousness because he didn't rush. He helped her down from the wagon, lit the lamp inside their house, and then just stood looking around with a satisfied expression. "Our home," he said softly. "Can hardly believe it." "It's real," she assured him, touching his arm. "We're real." He turned to her, cupping her face in his hands. "Zara, we don't have to, tonight I mean. If you're nervous or need time, we have all the time in the world now." The tenderness in his words eased her anxiety. "I'm nervous," she admitted. "But I don't want to wait. I want to be your wife in every way." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and she felt the last of her tension melt away. This was Press, the man she loved who loved her back. There was nothing to fear here, only joy to be found. That night, they came together with a mixture of passion and tenderness, learning each other's bodies the way they'd been learning each other's hearts. Press was patient and gentle, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted each step before proceeding. And Zara discovered that married love was even more wonderful than she'd imagined, a joining of not just bodies but souls. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their marriage bed, Press's arm around her and her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, his arm tightened around her. "I love you too, more than words can say." They fell asleep like that, wrapped up in each other, beginning the first night of the rest of their lives. The months that followed were full of work and joy in equal measure. Press continued working for Robert while also building up their own small property. He'd bought 6 head of cattle with his savings, the beginning of what he hoped would eventually be their own herd. Zara continued keeping the books for the ranch, but also threw herself into making their house a home, planting a garden, learning to cook on the temperamental stove. It wasn't always easy. There were disagreements, as any married couple had. Press sometimes worked himself too hard, coming home exhausted and irritable. Zara sometimes withdrew into her own thoughts when she should have spoken up about what was bothering her. But they learned to talk through their issues, to apologize when they were wrong and forgive when they were hurt. And through it all, their love deepened and grew stronger. In the spring of 1879, Zara realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, her body changing in subtle ways, but she waited until she was certain before telling Press. She chose a quiet evening after dinner when they were sitting together on their porch watching the sun set. "I have something to tell you," she began, suddenly nervous despite the happiness flooding through her. Press looked at her, concern immediately creasing his brow. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, the opposite actually." She took his hand, placing it on her still flat belly. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, processing. Then his face transformed, joy and wonder mixing with something that might have been tears. "A baby, you're sure?" "I'm sure. In about 6 months we'll be parents." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "A baby," he repeated, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." That night he lay with his hand on her stomach, talking softly to the child growing inside her. Zara fell asleep listening to him make promises to their unborn child, vows to be the best father he could be, to keep them safe and loved always. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Zara dealt with morning sickness for the first few months, but Press was attentive, bringing her ginger tea and crackers, holding her hair back when she was ill, never complaining about the interrupted sleep or extra work. As her belly grew, he became almost overprotective, insisting she not lift anything heavy, not work too hard in the heat. It was sweet even when it was frustrating, this evidence of how much he cared. Margaret was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a great aunt, immediately beginning to sew baby clothes and collect items they'd need. Robert built a cradle, working on it in his spare time with the same care he'd put into their marriage bed. In October of 1879, on a cool autumn night, Zara went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Press stayed by her side the whole time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, telling her she was doing great even when she screamed at him that this was his fault. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, their son was born. He came into the world wailing, healthy and strong, with a shock of dark hair and his father's green eyes. A boy, the midwife announced, cleaning him quickly before placing him in Zara's exhausted arms. Perfect little boy. Zara looked down at her son, at this miracle she and Press had created, and felt her heart expand to contain a love she hadn't known was possible. When she looked up at Press, she saw tears streaming down his face as he gazed at their child. "Can I hold him?" he asked, his voice breaking. She transferred their son carefully into Press's arms, watching as this strong man cradled their tiny baby with infinite gentleness. Press looked down at his son with such pure love and wonder that Zara started crying too. "Hello, little one," Press whispered. "I'm your papa, and I'm going to love you and protect you every day of your life." They named him James Robert Garrett, after Press's father and Zara's uncle. Little James was a good baby, sleeping in reasonable stretches and eating well. Press was a devoted father, helping with nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending every spare moment holding his son. "I never knew," he told Zara one night as he rocked James to sleep. "I never knew I could feel like this, like my heart is walking around outside my body." "That's what it is," she agreed. "That's what love does." As James grew from infant to toddler, their life settled into new rhythms. Press still worked hard, but he always made time for his family. He'd come home for midday dinner and spend the hour playing with James, making him laugh with silly faces and games. In the evenings, after the work was done, he'd read to them both from whatever book Zara had borrowed from town. They were building something, the three of them. Not just a life, but a legacy. Roots that went deep into this California soil. When James was 2, Zara became pregnant again. This time she recognized the signs earlier, and they were both excited at the prospect of giving James a sibling. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and in the spring of 1882, their daughter was born. They named her Rebecca Margaret, and she was the image of her mother, with blonde hair and hazel eyes. Where James had been a calm baby, Rebecca was spirited from the start, demanding attention and refusing to be ignored. "She's got your stubborn streak," Press teased Zara, bouncing Rebecca as she fussed. "My stubborn streak," Zara laughed. "Have you met yourself? Fair point." He kissed Rebecca's forehead. "She's perfect." Their house had expanded too, Press adding on 2 more rooms and a proper second floor. They'd built up their herd to 30 cattle, enough that Press was starting to think about going into business for himself rather than working for Robert. It was a big step, one that required careful planning and saving, but they were moving toward it steadily. Life wasn't without its challenges. There was a drought in the summer of 1883 that tested everyone's resources. James got sick that winter with a fever that had them both terrified until it finally broke after 3 days. Rebecca was thrown from a horse when she was 4, breaking her arm and giving her parents both gray hairs. But through everything, Press and Zara faced it together. They'd built a partnership based on love and trust, on honest communication and mutual respect. When times were hard, they leaned on each other. When times were good, they celebrated together. One evening in the spring of 1885, they sat on their porch watching James and Rebecca play in the yard. James, now 5, was teaching his 3-year-old sister how to skip stones in the water bucket, both of them laughing when the stones plopped straight to the bottom. "Happy?" Press asked, his arm around Zara's shoulders. "Always when I'm with you." She leaned into him, comfortable in the warmth of his body beside hers. "Though I am wondering about something." "What's that?" "When you were drifting before you came to Concord, did you ever think about settling down? Having this?" She gestured to their home, their children, the life they'd built. He was quiet for a moment, considering. "I thought about it sometimes. Late at night in some hotel room or sitting by a campfire, I'd think about what it would be like to have a home, a family." But it always seemed like something for other people, like I'd missed my chance for it. What changed? I met you. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. The moment I saw you behind that water trough, something in me just knew, this is it. This is what you've been looking for. Zara turned to look at him fully. You knew that fast, not consciously maybe, but somewhere deep down, yeah, I knew. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Why do you ask? I've been thinking about that day, she admitted. About how random it was, how easily we might have never met. If that rustler had chosen a different day, if I'd gone to town an hour earlier or later, if you'd ridden through without stopping. But we did meet. That's what matters. I know. I just sometimes wonder if you ever regret it. Settling down, I mean. You were free before, could go wherever you wanted. Now you're tied to this place, to us. He shifted to face her fully, his expression serious. Zara, look at me. When she did, he continued. I have never, not for one single second, regretted choosing this life with you. Yes, I was free before, but I was also lonely and empty and just going through the motions. What I have now, what we have together, it's everything I never let myself hope for. But don't you sometimes miss it? The adventure, the freedom. The only adventure I need is watching our children grow up. The only freedom I want is the freedom to love you without holding back. He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. You asked if I'd ever settled down. The truth is, I already have. With you. The moment I saw you, the moment I fell in love with you, I settled, and I've never looked back. Tears filled her eyes. I love you so much. I love you too, more every day, which I didn't think was possible. He kissed her softly. We're building something here, Zara. Something that's going to last. Our children will have what I lost, what you lost. Stability. Love. A home that's filled with both. And what about more children? She asked, a small smile playing at her lips. Think we're done it too? His eyes widened. Are you saying? Not yet, she laughed. But I'm thinking about it. James and Rebecca could use another sibling, and you're such a good father. Only because I have such a good partner. He pulled her close. However many children we have, as long as they're ours, I'll be happy. They sat there as the sun set, watching their children play, dreaming about the future. It was a quiet moment, unremarkable in many ways. But it was these moments, Zara thought, that made up a life. Not the big dramatic gestures, but the small daily choices to love, to stay, to build something together. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. In 1886, Robert died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving Margaret a widow. It was devastating for all of them, but especially for Zara, who'd thought of him as a second father. Press held her through the grief, attending to the practical matters of the funeral and the ranch while she mourned. Margaret, strong despite her sorrow, decided to sell the ranch. She was getting older and couldn't manage it alone. Press and Zara bought it, taking over the operation and moving into the main house with their children so Margaret wouldn't have to live alone. It was a big change, suddenly going from working for someone else to being their own bosses. But Press had learned the business well over the years, and Zara's bookkeeping kept them profitable even in lean years. They hired on good hands, treated them fairly, and built a reputation as honest ranchers who stood by their word. In 1887, Zara gave birth to their third child, another son they named William Thomas. And in 1889, their fourth and final child arrived, a daughter they called Sarah Jane. Their house was full of noise and love and the organized chaos that came with raising 4 children. James grew into a serious boy who loved books and learning as much as ranch work. Rebecca was bold and fearless, always climbing trees or racing horses despite her mother's protests. William was gentle and thoughtful, with a gift for gentling even the wildest horses. And Sarah was sunny and sweet, charming everyone she met. Press was in his element as a father, patient and kind but firm when needed. He taught his sons to ride and rope, to work hard and treat others with respect. He taught his daughters that they were just as capable as any man, that their dreams mattered just as much. And through it all, he loved Zara with a steadiness that never wavered. They had their disagreements, as any couple married for years would. But they always came back to each other, always chose love over pride, connection over being right. One evening in the summer of 1892, when their oldest was 12 and their youngest was 3, they found themselves alone on the porch for a rare, quiet moment. The children were sleeping, the ranch hands were settled for the night, and even Margaret had retired early. Press pulled Zara into his lap, something he still did even after all these years. She went willingly, resting her head on his shoulder with a contented sigh. Tired? He asked, his hand rubbing gentle circles on her back. Exhausted, she admitted, but happy. Me too. He kissed her temple. I was thinking about something today. What's that? It's been almost 14 years since the day we met. Since I slid in behind that water trough and you looked at me like I was crazy. She laughed softly. You did appear out of nowhere. I thought you might be an angel at first. An angel, me. It was the shock. I wasn't thinking clearly. She lifted her head to look at him. But I'm glad you were there, glad you stayed. Where else would I go? He cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone. Everything I love is right here. 4 children, a ranch, a mother-in-law living with us, she teased. Not quite the romantic vision of settling down. It's better, he said seriously. It's real, it's ours. It's the life we built together from nothing but hope and hard work. Do you ever think about what might have happened if things had been different? If you'd ridden past Concord that day? No, he said firmly, because I didn't ride past. I stopped, I met you, and I fell in love. Everything else follows from that. Still so certain, even after all these years. More certain now than I was then. He kissed her, slow and sweet. I've had 14 years to watch you be an amazing wife, mother, and partner. 14 years to fall deeper in love with you every single day. If anything, I'm more settled now than I was then. More rooted. Good, she whispered against his lips, because I'm not letting you go anywhere. Wouldn't dream of it. They sat there in the peaceful evening, wrapped up in each other, as secure in their love as they'd been on their wedding night. The stars were coming out above them, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss all those years ago. Inside the house, their children slept safely. In the bunkhouse, good men who worked for them rested, knowing they'd be treated fairly come morning. In the paddock, horses and cattle dozed, part of a thriving operation that bore the mark of Press and Zara's hard work. It wasn't a perfect life. There would be more challenges ahead, more sorrows and struggles. Children would grow up and leave home. Circumstances would change. But through it all, Press and Zara would face it together as they had from the beginning, because Press had been right that first night under the stars. When it was right, it was right. And what they had was as right as anything could be. The years continued to roll by, bringing both the expected milestones and unexpected surprises. James, their eldest, showed an aptitude for learning that reminded Zara of her younger self. When he turned 14, they sent him to school in San Francisco, a decision that was both proud and heartbreaking. He came home for holidays and summers, full of stories about the city and dreams of becoming a lawyer. Rebecca, true to her adventurous nature, announced at 16 that she wanted to learn to break horses professionally. Press, who might have balked at such an unconventional choice for a daughter, instead worked with her every day, teaching her everything he knew. By the time she was 18, she was the best bronc rider in 3 counties, man or woman. William proved to have the gentlest touch with animals that anyone had ever seen. Horses that were skittish with everyone else would calm under his hands. By 15, neighboring ranches were paying him to gentle their problem horses. He was quiet like his father but had his mother's thoughtful nature. Sarah, the baby of the family, was growing into a charming young woman who seemed to collect friends wherever she went. She had a gift for bringing people together, for smoothing over conflicts and making everyone feel welcome. Margaret doted on her, teaching her all the social graces that frontier life sometimes lacked. Preston and Zara watched their children grow with a mixture of pride and bittersweet awareness that their time as a young family was passing. But they were entering a new phase, one where they could see the fruits of all their hard work and sacrifice. The ranch prospered. By 1895, they were running over 500 head of cattle and had acquired another 200 acres of grazing land. They'd built a new barn, expanded the bunkhouse, and even installed one of those new windmills that pumped water automatically. Press had proved to have a keen business sense, knowing when to buy and when to sell, when to take risks and when to play it safe. But he never let the business consume him. He still made time for Zara, still courted her like they were newlyweds. They'd established traditions over the years. Sunday rides, just the two of them, Friday night dinners where no business was discussed, dancing in the kitchen while the children groaned and laughed. On their 15th wedding anniversary, Press surprised her with a trip to San Francisco. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in fancy restaurants, saw a show at the theater. It was glamorous and exciting, but Zara found herself missing their simple life at home, the quiet evenings on their porch, the sound of their children's laughter. Ready to go home? Press asked on their last night, reading her mood as he always could. Is that terrible? We've had such a wonderful time. Not terrible at all. He pulled her close as they stood at their hotel window, looking out over the glittering city lights. Home is where we belong. Where we've built our life. I do love our life, she said softly. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts because we've faced them together. Going to make me cry on our anniversary? He teased, but his voice was rough with emotion. She turned in his arms to look up at him. After 15 years of marriage, his face was as dear to her as her own. There were lines now that hadn't been there when they met, threads of silver in his dark hair. But the green eyes were the same, warm and full of love when they looked at her. I was just thinking, she said, about that day you came into town, how scared I was behind that water trough, how you appeared like some kind of hero from a story. I was just in the right place at the right time. No, you were exactly where you needed to be. We both were. She touched his face gently. Everything that's happened since, all the joy and love and life we've built, it all started with that moment, with you choosing to help a stranger. Best decision I ever made. He kissed her forehead. Well, that and asking you to marry me. I would have been disappointed if you hadn't. They laughed together, the easy laughter of two people who knew each other completely and loved each other anyway. Or maybe because of it, when they returned home, they found the house in mild chaos. William had accidentally let all the chickens out, and Sarah was chasing them around the yard while Rebecca offered unhelpful commentary from the porch. James was home from school for the summer and was trying to restore order with limited success. Parents are back. Rebecca called out when she spotted them, just in time to deal with the chicken situation. The chicken situation, Press echoed, but he was already moving to help, his face split in a grin. This, Zara thought as she watched her family come together to solve the silly crisis, this was everything. Not the fancy hotel or the theater shows, but this messy, chaotic, beautiful life they'd created together, Margaret appeared at her elbow, slipping an arm through hers. "Good trip." "Wonderful, but it's good to be home." "It always is, dear. It always is." The turn of the century brought changes to Concord and to California as a whole. The town was growing, civilization creeping in with its railroads and telegraph lines and modern conveniences. Press and Zara adapted with the times, installing telephone service at the ranch, buying one of those new motorized vehicles that terrified the horses. But some things remained constant. Their love, tested by time and trial, had only grown stronger. They still held hands while walking, still stole kisses in the barn when they thought no one was looking, still looked at each other across a crowded room and smiled, sharing private jokes and memories. James graduated from law school and opened a practice in San Francisco, though he came home often. Rebecca married a fellow horse trainer, a good man who respected her fierce independence, and started her own horse training operation on land press. And Zara gave them as a wedding gift. William showed no interest in marriage, content with his horses and his work. Though Zara suspected there might be someone special he just hadn't told them about yet. And Sarah, at 17, was being courted by no less than 3 young men, much to her father's consternation. "They're all good boys," Zara soothed one evening, watching Press glower at a young man who'd come to call. "You have to let her make her own choice." "I know that. Doesn't mean I have to like it. You were once a young man courting someone's daughter," she pointed out. "That was different. I was trying to marry you and you're perfect. She's my baby girl. She's almost a woman, and she's smart and sensible because we raised her that way." Zara took his hand. "Have faith in what we taught her." He sighed, bringing her hand to his lips. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You're just finally noticing." In the spring of 1902, Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78. She'd lived to see her grandchildren grow into fine adults, to watch the ranch prosper beyond what she and Robert had dreamed. Her funeral was well attended, a testament to a life well lived. That night, Press held Zara while she cried for the woman who'd been like a second mother to her. "She was happy," he reminded her gently. "She got to see us build our life, raise our children. Not everyone gets that, I know. I'm grateful for every year we had with her, but I'll miss her." "Me too. She was a good woman." They grieved together, finding comfort in each other as they always had. And slowly, life returned to its rhythms, adjusted to the loss but continuing forward. Sarah married the following year, choosing the quietest of her suitors, a doctor's son who'd won her over with kindness and genuine interest in her thoughts and dreams. The wedding was a grand affair, with guests coming from as far away as San Francisco. Zara cried watching her youngest walk down the aisle, press his hand tight on hers. "That's all of them," he murmured, "all grown and starting their own lives." "We did good," she whispered back. "They're all happy. Thanks to you, thanks to us." With the children grown and gone, Press and Zara found themselves adjusting to a new stage of life. The ranch kept them busy, but there were more quiet moments now, more time for just the two of them. They rediscovered the simple pleasure of each other's company without the demands of raising children. Press, now in his early 50s, still worked hard but had trained up a reliable foreman who could handle the day-to-day operations. This gave him more time to spend with Zara, to take those long rides they'd loved when they were courting, to sit on the porch and watch the sunset without interruption. One evening in the summer of 1905, 27 years after they'd first met, they sat together on that same porch, older but no less in love. Zara's hair had silver threads now, and Press's face was weathered by decades of sun and wind. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the young people they'd been, the girl behind the water trough and the cowboy who'd shielded her. "You ever think about that day?" Zara asked, her head resting on Press's shoulder. "The day we met, all the time," he admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding past Concord, how I almost didn't stop that day." "What made you stop?" "Honestly, I don't remember. Needed supplies, maybe. Or my horse needed rest. Some mundane reason that ended up changing my entire life." He kissed the top of her head. "Best choice I ever made, stopping in that particular town on that particular day. Even with all the hard times, the struggles and the losses, especially with those," he said firmly, "because we faced them together. Because you were there beside me through all of it, making me stronger, making me better." She lifted her head to look at him. "I couldn't have done any of it without you. That's how it's supposed to work. Partnership. Two people choosing each other every day, building something that's bigger than either of them alone." He cupped her face, thumb stroking her cheekbone in the gesture that had become so familiar over the years. "I love you, Zara. Just as much now as I did the day I married you. More even." "I love you too. Always." They kissed, soft and sweet, a kiss that held decades of love and commitment and shared joy. Around them, the ranch settled into evening quiet, the life they'd built continuing its steady rhythm. As the years advanced further, their children began to give them grandchildren. James and his wife had twin boys in 1906. Rebecca had a daughter in 1907, a little Spitfire who was already trying to ride before she could properly walk. William surprised everyone by marrying a quiet schoolteacher in 1908, and they had a son later that year. Sarah had 2 children in quick succession, a boy and a girl who were as charming as their mother. Press and Zara embraced their new roles as grandparents with joy. Their house, which had been so quiet after the children left, once again filled with laughter and chaos when the grandchildren came to visit. Press was patient and playful with them, getting down on the floor to play despite his aging knees, telling them stories about the old days. "You're going to spoil them rotten," Zara told him, watching him let his granddaughter put flowers in his hair. "That's a grandparent's job," he replied serenely, completely unbothered by the feminine decorations. "Besides, their parents will keep them in line. We just get to enjoy them." She joined them on the floor, adding her own flowers to the arrangement. Their granddaughter giggled with delight, and Zara's heart felt so full she thought it might burst. This, she thought, this is what it was all for. These moments of simple joy, generations of love continuing forward. In the winter of 1910, Press caught a bad cold that turned into pneumonia. For weeks, Zara barely left his side, nursing him through fevers and chills, terrified she might lose him. It was the first time she'd truly faced the possibility of life without him, and it shook her to her core. But Press was stubborn as the day they'd met. He fought his way back to health, driven by sheer willpower, and he claimed the knowledge that Zara needed him. When he was finally well enough to sit up, to eat solid food, to complain about being cooped up inside, Zara cried with relief. "Don't you dare leave me," she told him, holding his hand tight. "We have years yet, decades." "I'm not going anywhere," he promised. "Takes more than a little pneumonia to separate me from you." But the illness had aged him, and Zara too. They were both in their 60s now, their bodies not as strong or resilient as they'd once been. They had to face the reality that they were entering the final phase of their lives together. It didn't make them maudlin. If anything, it made them more determined to savor every moment. They laughed more, loved more openly, said, "I love you," dozens of times a day, because why save the words when they could be spoken? The ranch remained profitable, but they turned over more and more of the operation to their foreman and to James, who developed an interest in the business side of ranching. This freed Press and Zara to focus on each other, on their grandchildren, on the simple pleasure of being together. One afternoon in the spring of 1915, they rode out to the spot where Press had proposed all those years ago. The view hadn't changed much, the valley still stretching out below them, the sky still vast and blue above. They sat on a blanket, sharing bread and cheese, comfortable in the silence that came from decades of companionship. Finally, Zara spoke. "You have any regrets?" she asked. "About how your life turned out?" Press considered the question seriously, as he always did her questions. "I regret the years I wasted drifting before I found you. Wish I'd settled down sooner, had more time with you. What else? That's it. Everything else, even the hard parts, led me here. To this moment, sitting with you, looking back on a life well lived." He took her hand. "What about you?" "I regret that I didn't tell you I loved you sooner, that I wasted time being cautious when I could have been loving you. We were both cautious, and then we weren't, and we've had 36 years of marriage to make up for it." 36 years, she repeated wonderingly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday we were young and just starting out. Other times it feels like we've been together forever. Both things are true." He pulled her close, and she settled against him with the ease of long practice. Time is funny that way. They sat there as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Two people who'd found each other through chance and chosen each other through determination. Who'd built a life, raised a family, created a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. "Press," Zara said softly. Thank you." "For what?" "For stopping in Concord that day. For being brave enough to shield a stranger from gunfire. For seeing something in me worth staying for." He kissed her temple, his arm tightening around her. "Thank you for giving me a reason to stay. For showing me what home really means. For loving me when I didn't think I deserved to be loved. You've always deserved love. Maybe, but I didn't believe it until I met you." As they sat there in the fading light, Zara reflected on the strange and winding path that had brought them to this moment. If that rustler had chosen a different day, if Press had ridden through without stopping, if she'd been standing anywhere else, their paths might never have crossed. They might have lived their whole lives without ever knowing what they were missing. But they had met. Against all odds, in a moment of violence and chaos, they'd found each other. And they'd chosen, every day for over 3 decades, to keep finding each other. That was the real story, Zara thought. Not the dramatic beginning, but the daily decision to love, to stay, to build something lasting. The unsexy work of compromise and forgiveness, of showing up even when it was hard, of choosing each other over and over again. "What are you thinking about?" Press asked, reading her thoughtful mood. "Us, how lucky we are, the luckiest." He helped her to her feet, their movements slower now but still in sync. "Ready to head home, always, as long as you're there." They rode back to the ranch in the gathering dusk, 2 figures on horseback against the vast California landscape. When they arrived, lights were burning in the windows of their house, warm and welcoming. Their children and grandchildren were visiting for Sunday dinner, and the sound of laughter drifted out to greet them. This, Zara thought as Press helped her down from her horse, his hand steady and sure despite the years. This is everything. Not a perfect life, but a real one. Full of love and struggle and joy and sorrow, all woven together into something beautiful. They walked into their house hand in hand, greeted by the happy chaos of family. Their children's faces lit up when they saw them, and grandchildren rushed over for hugs. The dinner table was set. Food was steaming in serving dishes, and for a moment, Zara just stood there taking it all in, all of this, from a single moment of chance. From a cowboy who'd stopped in the right town on the right day and had the courage to shield a stranger. from a woman who'd been brave enough to offer coffee and see where it led. "Grandma, Grandpa, come sit," one of the grandchildren called. "Dinner's getting cold." They took their places at the head of the table, surrounded by the family they'd created, the legacy they'd built together. Press found her hand under the table, threading his fingers through hers in the gesture that had become as natural as breathing. And as the dinner conversation swirled around them, full of laughter and stories and the comfortable noise of people who loved each other, Zara sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For second chances and brave cowboys. For coffee shared and kisses stolen. For children raised and grandchildren spoiled. For a partner who'd stood by her through everything, who'd loved her without reservation or condition. For a man who'd already settled down, though she hadn't known to ask the question yet. The years that followed brought the inevitable changes that age brings. They moved a bit slower, slept a bit more, forgot things they would have remembered easily in their youth. But their love remained constant, a steady flame that had long ago moved past passion into something deeper and more enduring. In 1920, they celebrated their 42nd wedding anniversary with all 4 children and 12 grandchildren present. It was a grand party, with music and dancing and enough food to feed half the county. James gave a toast that made Zara cry, talking about the example his parents had set, the love they'd modeled, the life they'd built through hard work and dedication. "To my parents," he concluded, raising his glass, "who showed us all what it means to truly commit to another person, may we all be as lucky in love as they have been." "Hear, hear," the room chorused, and Zara found herself pulled into Press's arms for a dance. They moved slowly across the floor, Press's hand firm on her waist, her head resting against his shoulder. Around them, their family danced and celebrated, but Zara was aware only of the man holding her, the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. 42 years, she murmured. "Can you believe it?" "Every day," he replied. "And every day I'm grateful. Even though I'm old and gray now." He pulled back to look at her, his green eyes still sharp despite the years. "You're still the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. Still the only one I want to wake up next to every morning, sweet talker, truth teller." He kissed her softly, not caring that their children and grandchildren were watching. "I love you, Zara Garrett, today and always. I love you too, so much it still surprises me sometimes." They continued to dance, lost in each other and in memories of all the dances they'd shared over the decades. The first one at their wedding, uncertain and new. The one in their kitchen when Rebecca was a baby and wouldn't stop crying. The one at James's wedding, proud and bittersweet. So many dances, so many moments, all woven together into the fabric of their shared life. As the party wound down and their family began to leave, Press and Zara stood on their porch waving goodbye. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road and the house was quiet again, they sank into their rocking chairs with matching sighs of contentment and exhaustion. "That was a good party," Press said, reaching for her hand. "The best," she agreed, lacing her fingers through his. "I'm so proud of what we've built, not just the ranch or the business, but our family. Look at our children, Press. They're all happy, all building good lives." "Because they had good examples," he said. "You were an amazing mother, Zara, patient and kind, but also strong. You taught them how to be good people. We taught them together. You were just as important." They sat in companionable silence, rocking gently, hands clasped between their chairs. The night was clear, stars brilliant above them, and Zara was reminded of that first night when Press had taken her to see the stars after their dinner date. How young they'd been, how full of hope and dreams. All those dreams had come true, she realized. Maybe not exactly as they'd imagined, but in ways that were even better because they were real. They'd faced hardships they couldn't have anticipated, found joys they hadn't known to hope for, built something that would last long after they were gone. "You remember what you asked me," Press said suddenly. "Years ago, about whether I'd ever thought about settling down." "I do. You said you already had with me. I've been thinking about that conversation lately, about what settling down really means." He turned to look at her, his weathered face dear in the moonlight. "I used to think it meant giving up freedom, tying yourself to one place and one person. But that's not it at all. No, no. Settling down is about finally being free, free to love without holding back, free to build something lasting, free to be yourself with someone who knows all your faults and loves you anyway." He brought her hand to his lips. "I settled down with you, but I've never felt trapped or limited. I've only felt more myself." Tears slipped down Zara's cheeks. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said to me." "Well, I've had 42 years to practice." He smiled, that warm smile that still made her heart flutter. "Come here." She moved from her chair to his lap, something she still did despite their age, despite the way his knees protested. He wrapped his arms around her, and she nestled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "I want you to know something," he said softly. "If I had to do it all over again, if I could go back to that day in Concord and choose a different path, I wouldn't change a thing. Every moment with you, every high and low, every joy and sorrow has been worth it. You've been worth it." "So have you," she whispered. "You were my miracle, Press, my answered prayer that I didn't even know to pray for." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped up in each other under the vast starry sky. Two people who'd found each other through chance and held on through choice, who'd built a life that was richer and fuller than either could have imagined. Eventually, the night air grew cool enough that they went inside, climbing the stairs to their bedroom with slow but steady steps. They helped each other prepare for bed as they had for decades, moving in comfortable synchronization. When they finally lay down together, Press pulled Zara close, her back to his front, his arm around her waist. It was how they'd slept for 42 years, and it still felt as right as it had on their wedding night. "Good night, my love," he murmured against her hair. "Good night," she replied, covering his hand with hers. "See you in the morning. Always." As Zara drifted off to sleep, safe and loved in her husband's arms, she felt a deep sense of peace. Whatever tomorrow brought, whatever challenges or joys lay ahead, they would face them together. Just as they always had. That was the promise they'd made to each other so long ago, standing in that little church in Concord. For better or worse, in sickness and health, until death parted them. And they'd kept that promise every single day since. Some love stories burn hot and fast, flaring bright before fizzling out. But theirs had been different. Theirs had been a slow burn, steady and constant, building into something that could weather any storm. A love that didn't just endure but flourished, growing deeper and richer with each passing year. And as sleep claimed her, Zara's last thought was one of profound gratitude. For the gunshot that had brought them together. For the cowboy who'd become her everything. For a life lived fully and loved completely. For the simple, perfect truth that he'd already settled down with her, and had never once regretted it. The morning light filtered through the curtains, painting their bedroom in soft gold. Zara woke first, as she usually did, and lay still for a moment, feeling the weight of Press's arm around her, hearing his slow, steady breathing. Even after all these years, this remained her favorite moment of the day, this quiet space before the world intruded, when it was just the two of them. She turned carefully in his arms, not wanting to wake him yet, just wanting to look at him. His face was relaxed in sleep, the lines smoothed out, and she could see traces of the young man he'd been when they met. She loved both versions of him, the young cowboy and the aging rancher, because they were both her Press. His eyes opened, catching her watching him. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning. Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." "I don't mind," he smiled, pulling her closer. "Waking up to you looking at me like that is still the best part of my day." "How do I look at you?" "Like I hung the moon." He kissed her forehead. "Like you still love me as much as you did when we were young." "I do love you that much. More, actually." They lay there for a while longer, neither in a hurry to start the day. The ranch was in good hands, their children were settled, and they'd earned the right to a leisurely morning. Finally, they rose and began their day, moving through the familiar routines with practiced ease. Breakfast together in the kitchen, Press reading the newspaper while Zara planned their week. A walk around the property to check on things, though the foreman handled most of it now. Time in the office going over the books, a task they still did together because Zara liked having Press nearby while she worked. It was ordinary and unremarkable and absolutely perfect. In the afternoon, they received an unexpected visitor. A young man rode up to the house, looking nervous and uncertain. Press went out to greet him, Zara following behind. "Can we help you, son?" Press asked kindly. "I hope so, sir. My name's Daniel Collins. I'm looking for work and I heard you might be hiring." Press and Zara exchanged glances, a whole conversation passing between them in that look. "We might be," Press said. "What's your experience?" As the young man talked about his background, his hopes of saving enough money to start his own small operation someday, Zara saw something familiar in his earnest expression. A young man trying to find his place in the world, to build something lasting. "Tell you what," Press said when Daniel finished. "Come back tomorrow morning, we'll give you a trial run, see how you work out." "Really? Thank you, sir. Thank you both." Daniel's face lit up with hope and gratitude that made him look even younger. "I won't let you down." After he rode off, Press turned to Zara with a rueful smile. "Reminded me of myself at that age. That's why you hired him." "That's why I hired him," he agreed. "Everyone deserves a chance. We got ours, didn't we?" "We did." She slipped her arm through his. "And look what we made of it." They walked back to the house together, their steps matched from decades of walking side by side. Inside, the house was quiet, filled with memories of all the years they'd lived within these walls. Children growing up, grandchildren visiting, laughter and tears and everything in between. "Do you ever miss it?" Zara asked as they settled on the porch, their usual evening spot. "When the house was full of children and chaos." "Sometimes," Press admitted, "but I also like this, just the two of us. Getting to focus on each other without worrying about who needs what or who's fighting with whom. We did have our hands full, worth every minute." He took her hand, examining it in the fading light. Her skin was thin now, marked with age spots, but he held it as tenderly as he had when she was young. "These hands kept the books that made us successful, raised 4 children into good adults, helped birth calves and tend gardens and 1,000 other tasks. They're old hands now. They're beautiful hands, hands that have held mine for over 40 years. She leaned her head against his shoulder, overwhelmed by the simple sweetness of the moment. This was what it meant to grow old with someone, she thought. Not just the passage of time, but the accumulation of moments like this, small and precious and perfect. "I love you," she said, because she could never say it enough. "I love you too," he replied, because he felt exactly the same way. As the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in brilliant colors, they sat together in peaceful silence. Two people who'd built a life from nothing but hope and determination. Two people who'd loved each other through joy and sorrow, triumph and tragedy, youth and age. Two people who'd asked and answered the question that mattered most. Will you stay? Will you build this life with me? Will you choose me every day no matter what comes? And the answer had been yes. Always yes. For Press Garrett and Zara Owens Garrett, that yes had made all the difference. It had transformed two lonely individuals into a partnership, a family, a legacy. It had turned a chance meeting behind a water trough into a love story that would be told to their grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It had proved that sometimes, when you least expect it, life gives you exactly what you need. And if you're brave enough to reach for it, to hold on tight and never let go, it can give you everything you never knew you were missing. Press had settled down the moment he met Zara, though it took that conversation years later for her to truly understand what he meant. He'd found his home in her, his purpose in their life together, and she'd found the same in him. They'd built something that would last long after they were gone. Not just the ranch or the material success, but the example of their love. Their children and grandchildren had seen what commitment looked like, what partnership meant, what it meant to choose someone every single day. And sitting there on that porch as the stars began to emerge, Press and Zara knew that whatever time they had left together, it would be enough. Because every day together was a gift, every moment precious, every ordinary afternoon transformed into something special by the simple fact of being together. They'd lived a good life, a full life, a life rich in love and meaning and connection. And if they were asked whether they'd change anything, they'd both give the same answer Press had given years before. Not one single thing. The night deepened around them, but they stayed on their porch a while longer, reluctant to end the day. Finally, as the air grew cool, they went inside, locking up the house and climbing the stairs one more time. As they settled into bed, fitting together as naturally as breathing, Zara thought about all the nights they'd spent like this. Thousands upon thousands of nights, each one a reaffirmation of their commitment to each other. "Sweet dreams," Press murmured, his arm tightening around her. "Sweet dreams," she echoed, smiling into the darkness, because every dream she'd ever had worth having had already come true. And the best part was getting to share it with the man who'd appeared out of nowhere on a violent Tuesday morning and had stayed ever since. Her cowboy, her love, her home. The years would continue to pass, bringing whatever they would bring. But Press and Zara would face them together, just as they always had. Hand in hand, heart to heart, building their life one day at a time. And when the final day came, whenever that might be, they would meet it knowing they'd lived fully and loved completely. That they'd kept their promises to each other and built something that would outlast them both. That was the real measure of a life well lived. Not wealth or fame or achievement, but love. Simple, steadfast, enduring love. And by that measure, Press and Zara Garrett had succeeded beyond all reckoning. Their story, which began with gunfire and blood and fear, had transformed into something beautiful. A testament to the power of choice, of commitment, of showing up every day ready to love and be loved. They had settled down together, built a life together, grown old together, and they wouldn't have had it any other way. As sleep claimed them both, wrapped in each other's arms, the stars shone down on their peaceful ranch, on the life they'd built and the love they'd nurtured. On 4 children sleeping in their own homes, 12 grandchildren dreaming their own dreams, and a legacy that would continue for generations. All because a cowboy stopped in Concord, California on a Tuesday morning in 1878. All because a young woman needed help, and he gave it without hesitation. All because they were brave enough to see what they'd found and wise enough to hold on to it. That was their story. And it was a good one, the best kind of love story, the kind that lasted.